They came here in AD 79, but they had a fort there, Galava Gate, and all what remains of the fort are the foundation stones, because what the farmers did back then, they just took it to build all of the fort wall, but they marched across there where that snow is over here, and they gave that the name High Street, and that's why we say going to the High Street, you know, something like that, and because from up there they could see everything. That's the oldest dwelling in Troutbeck itself. That goes back to 1520, Thwaite Cottage. And you can see they're having a little bit of work done on it, probably stop it from collapsing. But that's an old original house here. The rest are sort of 200-300 years in the making. But this is Troutbeck, and that's because there is a stream or a small river that just goes in the valley there, and that's the local fish. So if you like fishing, you're spoiled up here for rainbow and brown trout in these areas. That's another old farmstead up there, Thomas and Mary Burkitt, 1692. So if you was quite wealthy, you would obviously build a house and put your family's name up. And if you was just a working class person, that's about as posh as it got up there. You see, 1622, that one. They just had, just left a little bit of cement clear, just to put the year in. 1622. But climb to the top of the Kirkstone Pass. We'll have a couple more stops before we get to Ullswater. That refreshment stop for you. Don't worry if you see me driving in the middle of the road. I'm not concentrating, I'm not falling asleep. I just want to keep the bus in as straight a line as possible, where I can, and that will just stop any motion sickness problems and hopefully reduce that feeling for you. So I do drift around in the road. There's a little lay-by up here on the right. If there's no one parked in it, I will stop so we can step out for a few minutes. He's a National Trust farmer, this guy here, and this is what, have you heard of Beatrix Potter? Yeah. Well, in 1920, that's what Beatrix Potter bought, this farm, this land here, and it's a Herdwick farm, and so she built the house, well, she bought the house on the left, and then she had the house on the right built in 1920 for her farm manager. That's what she would do.
Yeah.
She would just, because obviously she's a very wealthy woman in a day, so she would just buy up land and put you in there, say look after everything, and she would build you somewhere to live, type of thing, you know. And so yeah, apparently it was a disease-ridden farm when she took it. So she completely turned it around. I love how the snow stops at certain.
Yeah.
Reminds me of cake. Like icing.
On the top
reminds
of
me
the
of
cake.
icing.
Yeah.
Very nice though, isn't it? And it's kind of be on a drive to work, like, you know, it'd be alright.
So anyone can be a tenant farmer. There's a list, almost like similar to a house. What they would do is when properties come up, you go and have a look at it, and it might be a little bit run down. And whatever happens, once you sign that tenancy, you're responsible for the maintenance. So it don't matter if you spend 2,000 or 3,000 on a window or a couple of windows. It's always going to belong to the trust. Circle over there. Then we'll have a run down the Borrowdale Valley up to a place called Surprise View, Ashness Bridge, and then along to Honister Pass, Honister Slate Mine, before returning back to Keswick for around about 1:30, 1:45, where we'll have an hour for dinner, and then we will head over towards Grasmere, and then getting back into Windermere for just after 4 o'clock. It could be closer to 4:30, depending on traffic, etc.
Just for me. I ordered snow for today and it came. How about that?
So you can see the quarry over there, Red Scree Quarry. That's the name of that little fell side, that little mountain over there, Red Scree. And the slate takes on that pink hue. And that's because if you have a property built in the South Lakeland, that's the colour of the stone here. And if you go over to places like Coniston or Chapel-style Great Langdale have a green slate, and Coniston has a blue slate, so you have to use the local quarry for any building products like that. So there's about half a dozen of people working up in that place now. Every so often you hear an explosion, and they still use the old method of gunpowder. Otherwise they use like any other type of explosive, it would shatter the slate. And if you can just see Windermere out your left window. You see, that's just the northern end, Ambleside, that direction, just out to your left. going to get a nice view when we drop on the other side of Brothers Water.
Jeep. Wrong side of the fence.
Looks like we're in a bit of shade here. Down here.
That's lovely.
Probably going to be a little chilly as we step out here. So we're looking at Brothers Water in the distance. Looking quite blowy. And carriage onto right out to the middle of Windermere, an ice skate families. So we had the skating lakes. This was one of them. Yeah. And back in I think about in the mid 1740s thereabouts, two boys lost their lives on here. The ice gave way, and of course he went in to save his brother. And then William Wordsworth had the name of this water changed to Brothers Water in memory of those two kiddies, like these youngsters. And of course, the last time there is a picture of a Mini back in the 50s driving across Windermere, and that was about the last time they kind of really froze over, really, our lakes. The Hartsop Valley that we're in now, and that just simply means Valley of the Deer. And not that we see them this time of the day, really. It's generally early hours of the morning. They're seen wandering around, the red deer, the roe deer, etc. But they're normally up top this time of the day.
She was scratching his bum on the post.
Since there's only 5 of you and you all seem quite friendly with each other, I'm going to let you decide whether you would like an early lunch or a later lunch. It was like a quarter of a boat.
Yeah.
And it went off to Newcastle, and I believe it's gone into the John Muskin Museum now in Coniston.
Has it?
Yeah. Did you see the memorial plaque down there by the on Ullswater? It was Malcolm.
No.
Yeah, his father Malcolm Campbell was here. Yeah, Malcolm Campbell was here in '55.
Yeah.
No, we didn't see that.
What did you say this one is? About 7 miles, was it?
Yeah, 7¼ miles this one. The depth ranges from 50 to 100 to 200 feet, just depending on what part of the lake really. Just varies. And this was the lake, or the shores of here, Ullswater. This is where Dorothy Wordsworth, because people think they associate William Wordsworth with his Daffodils poem, where he wandered lonely as a cloud. But in typical man fashion, it was his sister that spotted them. She would make notes, and when he got home, he would just take her notes and make, you know, these poems and sonnets, etc. But she writes in a diary that because they walked everywhere, the Wordsworths, and she said that how she was walking behind her brother William along the shores of Ullswater when she spotted the daffodils that he goes on to write about. Of course, it's probably one of his most famous works. Of course, these ain't the daffodils that he would have seen or she would have seen, because these aren't indigenous. If you're in a good restaurant and you see Herdwick lamb on the menu, that's what you're going to get. They're the best ones to have really if you're a meat eater, like, you know. Shame really, but they're in the food chain, just, you know. Do you like lamb? Do you like a famous ridge walk on it called Sharp Edge? Covered in snow. It was completely bare yesterday, so it'll obviously crossing. There was talk of reopening the line, but quite a considerable amount of money to get it up and running again. But I think the way tourism is going, I wouldn't be surprised. I think dinner's coming, look.
Nice.
Oh, no, we're mistaken.
I've been on the roller coaster. People, anyone on the back seat. mile and a half, this one. And this only has a maximum depth of 60 feet. Derwent. I'm going to take you to a viewpoint and you're going to see the whole length of this lake and beyond, as I've said, over to Bassenthwaite Lake as well. In a few minutes. I'm going to drive out over a place called Ashness Bridge. On the way back down to Keswick, I will of course stop at Ashness Bridge so you can have a wander down and get a photograph of the water. It'd be nice up there today.
How does the global warming affect these lakes? Are they getting bigger or?
I mean, these flood a lot more, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the winter months, certainly. Yeah, so I mean the Lake District, I mean Storm Desmond, Kendal, the town of Kendal flooded. Friends of mine had 9 feet of water in their house, but I guess, you know, down south, places like Devon, Cornwall, they all suffer. And, but yeah, we've certainly got a lot more water in our lakes than what we ever did. A lot more local flooding. I think that's just going to get worse, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
As time goes on.
Yeah. Yes.
We will come back to this. We have to come back down this same road. So I'll stop at the top of the car park for you. We'll go up to Surprise View first. Plenty of water coming down. You'll be in your element if you can. Majesty Queen Elizabeth I, and she was the first person to bring miners over from Germany, and it was the same people, the Ritzler and the Steinberger mining company. And what the locals didn't like was the fact that these people were coming in from Europe taking jobs from local men. And so for their own safety they actually moved on to the islands of Derwent here. And it was a couple of years before they became accepted by the locals. This was another private house belonging to a chap called Victor Pocklington. This place here has now become an independent hostel, that house there. It stayed there for about £15 a night, believe it or not. Sun's gone behind the clouds now, hasn't it?
Yeah. Dark clouds.
Yeah. If you wanted something to do, this Honister.com, they do a via ferrata, which is an iron road across the mountain of Fleetwith Pike, and via ferrata is basically what they did, was created during the Second World War, and it's how the French resistance got around the Germans really without being seen. They just built these, put these steel rods into the sides of mountains and hooked themselves on and just basically traversed the mountains. And so it's quite a popular sport now, via ferrata. You can come and do a via ferrata at Honister, or as I said, you can do a mine tour, and I've done both of them and certainly recommend anything like that if you're wanting a bit of fun. Just see the valley just down the centre there. We see Sour Milk Gill coming down. There's it's in the cloud, but that's a mountain called Great Gable that the cloud's sitting on top up there. And if you stood up there, you'll be looking down on the Irish Sea. So it just gives you some indication of where we are really. It's the other side of there is that lake that I was telling you about, Ullswater. But to drive to it is about 50 miles from here, so it's quite a way. Cool. I love these Jacobs.
Hello,
They're lovely, aren't
baby.
they? Right.
Oh, that's cheap then.
Yeah, they're the Jacobs, them. I like them. Right, this is the Honister Pass. It's a bit unfortunate there's not actually anywhere to stop on here because of the nature of the road, but we'll
bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where they put the younger kids in this little waterfall here. Hill scrambling. There's one or two little drops, but nothing. Probably end up more of a bruised bum than anything else. Had to go over noisy Castlerigg. No, we're almost at the Slate Mine. What I will say about it, they've got very nice ladies' toilets.
How do you know?
Considering where it is, like, you know. So that's the Slate Mine up here. We're going to drop in the back door shortly. And as I say, we'll have 20 minutes. It's a shame the sun's gone in. I should have, well, I don't know really. You never know whether it's best to do a dinner before or after. But, you know, we can't change it now.
That's nature for you.
There we go, a bit of off-roading.
Oh,
Whoa! What do you
don't look at me.
Oh,
No. Oh, God.
so you can come here in the car and fill your boot. You can fill your boot for £20 here. Take as much slate as you want from here. So you can see the little road up. We're not going to be going up there, obviously. But if you're going to do the mine tour or the Via Ferrata, they take you up in the vehicles, and you basically traverse across that mountain of Fleetwith. And it's a 2,000-foot climb, and it's the best £35 you'll ever spend. And if you're not as brave and you don't want to do 70-metre cable walks, then you can just go into the mines itself for about £25 for a 2-hour mine tour.
2 hours, yeah?
The mine tour is about 2 hours, yep.
That's not too bad.
And as I say, I've done them both, so.
Yeah.
And that little engine there, if you're thinking what that's doing there, across the road here there was a railway line. And all of the slate come up, I don't know if you can see that little shed right at the top of the line.
yeah.
That's where the miners lived, the Victorians. And then there was a railway track, because of course that's on a cable, that little engine. And that would carry the slate all the way down into the workshop. But now they've exhausted that over there, and all of the slate now goes into that one up there, or comes out of that one up there. So we're just heading down to a place called Buttermere with the lake. Just a few minutes up the road here. We'll have a little stop there, and then we'll head up the Newlands Pass back over towards Keswick. Basically, when the Vikings, the Danes come and invaded places like here, they claimed the lakes. So, for instance, Windermere, that derives from Vinand, and it was Vinand's mere, obviously mere being just another word for a body of water. So it was Vinand's mere, and then you've got Ullswater, which was Ulla, which was another Viking chief. And this was Buffa, and that was another Viking fella. And so they just claimed these areas as theirs. So Buttermere actually derives from Buffa's mere. And all this land here, this all belongs to the Robinson family. I'll tell you a little story about the Robinson family once we get near Buttermere itself. But they own a considerable amount of land, and along with it, that little holiday cottage there, and it doesn't look much, and it's where a chap called Alan Turing would come on holiday here. That was do you remember there was a game, a film called The Imitation Game? It was, he was responsible, along with the others of course, for breaking the Enigma code during the Second World War, and but this was his holiday home, and he was really big into fishing, so he would come and stay here and actually fish on Buttermere itself. Another fella who would stay there as well, along with friends, was a chap called Jules Mallory, and Mallory, pre-1953, going to Everest, they would always come to this area and go up on the Red Pike here and train for like little winter climbing, really, in preparation of going to Everest. So they're quite a popular place. This was in its day. Buttermere. Now I know the sun's not out, but I will have a little stop up here in case anyone wants to hop out for 5 minutes. Do you want to jump out? I know it's a little bit. All in these gullies here. This one over is called Haystacks behind us, and they would just come and train for the Everest expeditions. I don't know, hunters for. Was a member of Parliament for Linlithgow in Scotland, a bit like Joseph Budworth. He came here for char fishing, and he met Mary Robinson, who would have been 10 years older then, and they got engaged, and the news of the engagement went into the London Post, etc, etc, and turned out that this wasn't Augustus Hope. It was a man called John Hatfield, who was a scam artist, and he had come up here and basically fell in love. Well, this girl fell in love with him and impersonating this guy, and he took all of her money and done a runner to Wales. And how it came about was because when it went in the national papers in London to say that Mary Robinson was engaged to this Augustus Hope fella, the brother of Augustus Hope contacted Joseph Budworth or the newspapers and said, my brother is travelling in Europe. I don't know who this man is, but it is not Augustus Hope. But by which time anyway he'd gone. And he was tracked down in Wales and took back to Carlisle, where he was sentenced to death by hanging. And that was, I know it's a bit extreme, isn't it? But it was basically for impersonating a member of Parliament and double bigamy, because the man was already married. And so basically, yeah, William Wordsworth and Budworth went to see this guy in prison in Carlisle before they hanged him anyway. And she went on to marry a local farmer, living to the ripe old age of about 36, I believe, Mary Robinson. And she's buried in the Lawton Church, about 5-6 miles from here. So yeah, and trying to think of the Melvin Bragg, the South Bank show. That's what it was called. Anyway, yeah. So if you Google and it's a shame because there's no pictures of her. There's sketches, but there are no actual images of Mary Robinson, which is quite sad, really. It would have been nice to see what all the fuss was about. But as I say, her descendants, they live here and they own that farm back where we came through, Robinsons, and they own the Fish Inn down at Buttermere. So we're just going to get down to where those cars are. That's where we turn right and start heading back. We're about 8 miles now from Keswick. So another hour and we will be, hopefully another hour, we will be in Grasmere, where we're going to spend about half an hour or so there. Let you get the chance to get yourself some gingerbread, if you like gingerbread. Have a look around the churchyard, St Oswald's Church. They've got a nice garden centre with toilets and a cafe. Probably tired of eating and drinking today, but it's... Well, I'm not sure we can get up this road. It doesn't look wide enough for the bus.
Just you look where you're going.
Look at your face. Got to get up quick before any cars come towards us. I know it's starting to rain a bit, but this is Moss Falls anyway. And I don't know if you wanted 5-10 minutes outside the bus or.
It's all great, so.
You want to? Do you want to jump out?
No. I'm
No?
not.
So that's Blencathra again that you can see in the distance there.
So what's it look like in the summer? Is it all green?
What's that?
Is it green in the summer?
Oh yes, yeah. The all of the bracken grows as well,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is nice.
Does the sheep keep it like this?
Basically, they've created the landscape over the
Yeah,
centuries. I mean, if it weren't for the Herdwick eating everything,
yeah,
this would just be forest again.
yeah.
And we like to think that the Herdwick is sort of ours really, is a British thing, but they actually came over with the Vikings.
Oh, so
They brought them over, you know, what would have been 1200 years ago, and they've been there ever since really. But no, if it's it was once upon a time it was all forest.
so there's many of these people descended from the Vikings. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
they've got-
I think I think we're all a bit of a mixed bag, aren't we? All of
Yeah.
us, really. Yeah, a lot of Viking, German descendants, again from the miners years ago when they settled here. Escapee. It obviously tastes better on this side of the fence.
Yeah.
Always. It's a bit ugly, isn't it?
Oh,
It's
is
not
it?
really
Oh, there
attractive.
he is. Hello.
See better days.
Yeah.
Nom 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 nom.
Alright.
Yeah, some fresh stuff there. New cooked.
As soon as you got Jemima Puddle Duck on the right, this is another Beatrix Potter farmstead here. And again, she bought this in the 1930s. And this is where Mrs. Tiggywinkle was born here, because that is Little Town. So I don't know if you've read the story of Mrs. Tiggywinkle, but that's where she lived in Little Town, just out to the right, coming up on her right. That's what that place is called. It's got a little shop over there, but yeah, Mrs. Tiggywinkle, she had the washboard, didn't she?
She did, yeah. Pulling an apron on.
And it talks of the stories, like talks of people looking down the chimney, or people looking in from Cat Bell's.
Yes.
And that's Cat Bell's right behind it. So she had a very vivid imagination.
Oh, it's two.
Oh, mum and baby, little baby. There you go. Herdy shop. Everything Herdwick.
Oh. RGB.
Now, if you're interested in Wordsworth at all, you've got the family graves in St Oswald's Church there. And right ahead of you, of course, is the Wordsworth Daffodil Garden, and that's the gingerbread shop, the former schoolhouse. Now, if you're wanting lose at all, just down there you see a brown sign, that's the Grasmere Garden Village, that's the garden centre. Right. And they will have toilets as well as a cafe, as well as little bits and pieces to buy. It's hard to believe, but once upon a time it was home to Mum and Dad and 6 children. And there was the Rigg family of Scotland. They moved here. And he believed that if he built a house over the river, he would avoid land tax, and it actually worked in his favour, the Rigg family. You'll see as we go across Mini Roundabout, it's not really anywhere to stop because it's just on the main thoroughfare, but we'll just point it out to you. It's just on the right. Not actually open yet, it opens in a few weeks' time, but it's just owned and run by the National Trust. Yeah, a family of 8 people.